These are the same kinds of questions. How do I live with the ocean? How do I work with the ocean? And that need to know is just getting more and more intense. It's always kind of been at the core of oceanography, at least for the last roughly 60 years. It's just gotten, actually in some sense, more interesting.
And welcome everyone to The Sea Has Many Voices, the weekly podcast on the oceans. This week I'm with Dr. Mark Abbott, the president and CEO of the WHOI Oceanographic Institution. And I'm really happy to be sitting outside the what's this building called again?
It's called LOSOS.
LOSOS.
It's all about ocean observing systems.
And to give you a sense, we're sitting next to floating buoys, we're sitting next to National Science Foundation logo, we're sitting next to the things of our trade, our oceanographic trade, tools that I love to see. And Mark runs the world's, how do you describe WHOI, which is called WHOI in the acronym, yeah. How do you describe it quickly?
WHOI Oceanographic is the largest private institution devoted to ocean research. Most other ocean institutions are part of universities, or they're national labs, or they're a lot smaller.
Okay. Now I'm really interested in something we talked about a minute ago, and that is, you mentioned that you came here because of various factors, including the what you just said, the largeness of it, the innovation of it, the science of it. But you also talked about how it was addressing problems of the day or needs of the day in society. And this is something that I've seen happen at WHOI and at other what I would call were originally ivory tower organizations. And for our listeners, ivory tower science organizations are organizations where scientists have traditionally been allowed to study whatever they want, and that's been the hallmark of science, not influenced by any policy agenda, any funding agenda, and therefore knowledge is pure and of the highest quality. But that's been changing, and I think it's been changing at WHOI too, and I'd like to hear about that.
That's a great question. We were talking earlier about how the Navy in the 1960s needed to know how the ocean worked. Biology, chemistry, physics, geology, all elements of the ocean.
And that was to conduct warfare.
Yeah.
Basically.
I think today that need to know is even more intense and comes from a broader set of demands. How are hurricanes going to change, and how is that going to affect construction along the coast? How are fisheries changing under expansion of ocean acidification or low oxygen waters? These are the same kinds of questions. How do I live with the ocean? How do I work with the ocean? And that need to know is just getting more and more intense. It's always kind of been at the core of oceanography, at least for the last roughly 60 years. It's just gotten, actually in some sense, more interesting. It's more diverse. There's a lot more unpredictability.
Yeah, I've run into it myself, Mark, and it's, you meet certain scientists from that are, how do I word this right way? I'll just say the truth. I want to say old school ivory tower school, who want to study what they study, and they don't want there to be any application of the research necessarily. They don't mind if there is, but they're not heading for that. Their world is let's just use for example the leafy sea dragon, because I do remember a guy that studied leafy sea dragons, and that's all he studied in his lab, and he didn't want to be influenced by overfishing. He didn't want to be talking to me about climate change unless it affected this. He wanted to do his research. He wanted it to be pure. He didn't want it to be applied. He didn't want a problem brought to his office and have him solve it. He wanted to be able to follow his instincts wherever they were. And that is something that scientists have always valued and they've wanted to have. But today, the planet is changing at a rate that it's never, faster than it's ever changed, through industrialization, through population growth, through climate change. And I'll voice my opinion. I feel that scientists need to step up now, and we need to not have the total luxury to study whatever we want. We need to apply what we know. I'd like to hear your views personally, and then you can separate those from your institution and how you guys are oriented to this. Because I believe there's been a change that I've noticed.
Yeah. No, again, a great conversation, because you could say, I'll just do whatever anybody asks, and I'll just do that. And in some sense, that's what a lot of environmental consulting organizations do, and that's great. They answer very specific questions. On the other extreme, it's I'll just do whatever I want. I think actually if you look almost all the sciences, they're somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. And I would say ocean sciences, particularly in the last 60 years, there's that balance between that free-form curiosity-driven and that need to know. And you want both of those, because if you just say, I need to know this problem and give me that answer, in some sense you've kind of already narrowed down. That curiosity, that unexpected, really can open things up. I'll give an example where it used to be that we thought we knew how what we call the subtropical gyres, the centers of the ocean, north of the equator, they were deserts. You know, we thought nothing lived there. The water was really deep blue. We thought it was a pretty simple ecosystem. The more we studied it, the more we understood, wow, this is a really dynamic ecosystem, and there are whole life forms that we didn't expect. There's a whole nother kind of food chain, what we call the microbial food chain, that we didn't know existed, and we understood more about the ocean. That informed how we think about managing the ocean. So if you just say, I'm going to answer that question, it can become very short-term and narrow, and you get surprised. If it's just curiosity-driven, well, you may not answer the important questions. So where that balance is a really interesting point.
Wow, you really helped me. That's a great answer, Mark. You said some scientists do what they're asked, and that's maybe the business model. Some scientists want to do what they want, which is what most scientists are like. Yeah. And what was the third category? Well, let me add the third category, because you didn't have one. I would say then there's what scientists need to do in order to enable civilization as we know to survive on this planet.
Yeah, that's sort of the longer that sort of middle question in
I would argue that that's an important part. And I'll tell you, I've been honored, this is a disclosure, to be on the Board of Governors at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution for some 14 years. And I was asked about 10 years ago by some staff here how you do conservation. They wanted to know, because I'd been involved in a lot of my work was applied. And I said, what do you mean? How do you do conservation? And they said, well, how do you do what you do? I said, what do you mean? And I was at the time working on creating or enabling, helping Pacific Island countries create marine protected areas. And I said, that. And they said, yeah, that. How do you do that? And I said, it's all about relationships. I said, you just got to go meet people and talk to them, and then do your research that you're doing, and you'll be able to tie that up. And since then, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, WHOI, has become a partner with me and others in the Pacific, and I want to thank you for that, because you brought your team in to help us study reefs, coral reefs, bleaching, which is a form of death reefs encounter from heating, by bringing in some of your big assets. I call them toys, but some of your big coring tools that you could core down into a coral reef and look back 700-800 years, which we weren't able to do before that. Prior to that, we were doing what I called one fish, two fish research, where you jump in the water and you kind of swim around and record what you have. So you've joined a lot of efforts your staff have here, and I thank you for that. So the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution has, I think, keeps the highest standard. I consider you the highest standard along with a few other organizations in oceanography. But you've also adjusted your path a little bit, I think, to deal with the world's issues of the day.
Right.
Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. Some of it is, it's not just a generational thing, but a lot of it is. That people are younger, particularly our younger scientists, are really interested in impact. They know their work's important, and they want to actually see that there's a connection between what they do basically 7 days a week. They only work, quote, 5 days a week, but most of them are out, working at home or on the weekends out in the field or whatever. They want to see that impact, to feel like their work is important.
Well, most of our world, Mark, is they're passion driven. Yeah. Everybody I know works 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and I'm proud of it. I love it. Yeah. I used to worry about it sometimes, because my friends and whatnot would say, yeah, I work too much, and I said, oh, I better slow down. But then I realized I like it. Yeah. Why should I stop? Now, I want to thank you, Mark, and I want to come back to our conversation. Thank you very much.